Welcome back, guys. It's your boy Blaine Fontaine. Thank you so much for all the views on my last budget bombs. It is now my #1 video by a long shot. So again, thank you for checking out my stuff. Without further ado, let's get into this, shall we? Kicking off our list is Telepathy. For 1 blue enchantment, your opponents play with their hands revealed. Very simple card, but for a whopping 1 mana, you get information above all of your opponent's stuff. You get to see all their counter spells they have available, all their removal spells they have available, any combo pieces they have in their hand you need to watch out for. It's especially good if you have counter magic and a lot of removal, so you know what you need to use your removal and your counter magic on. And honestly, it kind of has a pseudo group huggy effect because your opponents also want to know what your other opponents have. It's not super frequent that it gets blown up, unless people just honestly hate having their hand on the table, which I get it. Next up we have Crux of Fate. For 3 black, sorcery, choose 1. Destroy all dragons or destroy all non-dragons. 99% of the time we want to pick non-dragons, unless the rare dragon player comes over the table, and then, you know, you might want to use the dragon side, but typically you want to use it as a very budget version of the popular Wrath Damnation. I'm not saying this is in any way better than Damnation, because it isn't, unless you yourself are playing a dragon deck, but it is a nice budget alternative. So check it out. Acquire. For 3 blue sorcery, search target opponent's library for any artifact card and put it on the battlefield under your control. Then that player shuffles.
Like you could, G.
You might have heard of the amazing card called Bribery, which is extremely expensive, but what you may not have heard of is its little brother, Acquire. Acquire lets you search their deck for their best artifact and just slap it on your board for free. It's very common that you will get an artifact that costs more than 5, so you're almost always netting positive. There's usually at least one deck at the table that's running either an important artifact or they are an artifact deck themselves, and if absolutely no one is running artifacts, worst case scenario, steal their Soul Ring, which is still ramp. Not the best, but that's the absolute worst case scenario. He's a fantastic card, you know, grabbing people's Portal to Phyrexias on turn 5 is just chef's kiss. Next up is Bolt Bend. For 3 and 1 red, you get an instant. This spell costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Change the target of a single spell or ability with a single target. This is again a budget alternative to the very popular Deflecting Swat. And this, as long as your commander or any creature really, you have a very consistent flow of power 4 or greater cost creatures, you pay a single mana to redirect any target. You play swords? Nah. Let's say you swords their thing. They play a counterspell? Nah. Let's say you swords my Bolt Bend instead, changing the target of the counterspell to the Bolt Bend. Yes, that works. Let's say they cast, I don't know, something stupid like Colossification. Sure, Bolt Bend that to your thing too. Why not? As long as you're able to change a single target with another target. The target does have to be legal, so if they use an equipment to equip their creature, you can't change it to your thing. But what you can do is if they pay the mana to equip an equipment to one of their creatures, you can Bolt Bend it and make them target a creature they don't want to have the equipment. Changing targets is so fun to me that I literally built an entire deck around that. That's my Daryl deck that'll be coming out soon. It's extremely fun mechanic and really tests the old noggin for wacky interactions. Now for another wacky combat trick, we have Dress Down. For 1 and a blue, enchantment with flash. When Dress Down enters a battlefield, draw a card. Creatures lose all abilities. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Dress Down. This card is more than a combat trick, I may have lied a little. So, this card nullifies all abilities for the duration of the turn that it's played, and it draws you a card when you play it. This means that if they play something like a Rex Sage, after you've resolved this card, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any abilities. Their commander doesn't have any abilities. They attack you with a bunch of creatures that pump each other or some kind of wacky thing. They don't have abilities. They do have their base power and toughness, but that's it. And if a creature's power and toughness is statically based on an effect, such as Multani, the creature just dies. Star is equal to 0/0 unless otherwise defined, so stripping its text would just kill it. Dress Down is a very underrated card that honestly I should be putting in my decks a little more. I think it's a fantastic blowout, and the fact that it replaces itself and draws you a new card, it's hard to think of a game where this wouldn't have helped at some point. Trail of Evidence is our next entry. For 2 and a blue, you get an enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, investigate. This may seem like a weaker version of Archmage Emeritus, which in some stances it is, but the fact that it's an enchantment means that it is harder to remove for almost every color, and it makes artifacts, which is also relevant. Things like, Urza cares about artifact count. There are decks that just care about clues, like Eisenhorn. There are just, it just has so many applications. I'm not going to say it's inherently better than Emeritus, but it fits in a broader stroke of decks, not just instant sorcery tribal, but it also helps artifact synergies as well. That cares about artifact count especially. Now we have, oh god, I love this card so much. Ascend from Avernus. For white X. Sorcery. Return all creature and planeswalker cards with mana value X or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. Then exile Ascend from Avernus. If you're running a creature-heavy deck, especially ETBs or death triggers like Aristocrats or Blink decks, this card puts in work, especially if your curve is low enough. Let's say you have, 10 3 or less creatures and walkers in your graveyard. You only need to pay 6, as long as they're all 3 or less, and you just put all of them on the battlefield, untapped, ready to rock, doing their stuff. The only downside is that you have to exile the Ascend. Okay, usually don't need it more than once anyway. This is a very similar strategy to Living Death decks, but you only need to worry about your stuff. Living Death decks can backfire if your opponents have stronger ETBs than you, but this just doesn't care. Again, I'm not saying that Living Death is worse or better, but Ascend from Avernus, as long as your curve is low and your creature count is high, is a better card in that instance, at least in my opinion. Keeping on that same theme, we have Storm of Souls. For 4 white sorcery, return all creature cards from your river to the battlefield. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit with flying. In addition to their other types, exile Storm of Souls. Similar to our last entry, this card just puts every creature from your graveyard on the battlefield. Boom, right there. Untapped, they all get flying, which is nice. The only downside is if they are bigger, they shrink. But if your deck is centered around ETBs or death triggers like the last entry, then this is just an insane amount of value for you. This card is the reason why I love Orzhov so much. It's because cards like this that mass reanimate let you get all of your wacky black creatures back and white creature ETBs. Such an insane value. If you get board wiped and you get blown out, boom, they're all back. Things like Ascend and Storm of Souls are auto-includes if you're a creature-heavy deck and you're white, at least for me. Then they've never been disappointing. Even if you're holding one in your hand and you can't use it, that means that you have every creature you've played on the battlefield, and you're rocking already. Having one dead card doesn't matter, because if on the off chance they do board wipe you, you just go, everything's back. It's fantastic. This is a card that flew under a lot of people's radars. For 5 blue, 7 mana instant, this card costs 3 less to cast. If an opponent has 7 or more cards in their graveyard, draw 4 cards. Not the most exciting entry on our list, but 4 mana for 4 cards is an insane deal you will not find on any other card, at least for a fixed value. And the fact that it's instant speed is extremely good. Like, people play Harmonize, and that's 4 mana for 3 cards at sorcery speed, but this is 4 mana for 4 cards at instant speed. The only caveat is that your opponent has to have 7 or more cards in their graveyard. You don't need to be playing a mill deck to make this card good. People will just naturally, over time, have 7 cards in their graveyard, be it fetch lands, board wipes killing stuff, people sacking stuff, milling themselves. I think it's a fantastic card. I don't think every deck needs it, but if you're playing a copy spell deck, this card can really put in work mid to late game. And like I said, you don't really need to build around it. It'll just happen eventually throughout a game. I don't think I've ever played a game where no one had 7 or more cards in their graveyard by the end of it. It's just, I'd give it a try. It's cheap. Don't like it, take it out. Meh. Now we have my very favorite Sac Outlet in all of Magic. And I'm not even exaggerating. I love this card. For 2 colorless mana, you get an artifact with sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on Spawning Pit. Then you can pay 1, remove 2 charge counters from Spawning Pit, create a 2/2 colorless spawn artifact creature token. 2 mana for a 0 mana Sac Outlet. 0 mana Sac Outlet meaning you don't need to pay anything into sacrificing the creatures, you just sacrifice the creatures to get an effect. It is a phenomenal Sac Outlet that, again, it's 0 mana instant speed, sack as many creatures as you want, put that many charge counters on it, and you might think, well, why is this better than Phyrexian Arena, per se? Well, you can remove 2 charge counters to make a new body that the spawning kit can then eat as well. So it is a Sac Outlet that then gives you bodies to then sacrifice. In addition, if you get board wiped and you're left wide open, you have no blockers, well, pay 1, slap down a blocker, declare blocks, sack it, put that counter right back. It is an awesome card. I love this card. If I'm playing Aristocrats, it is honestly one of the first cards I add. I cannot recommend it highly enough. As long as you're clever with using it, this card is honestly, in my opinion, the best Sac Outlet in the entire game. And it's like under $2. It's such a deal. Trust me, you won't be disappointed if you play this in Aristocrats. Thanks again for checking out my video. Trying different things, trying to evolve my channel and whatnot. And feedback is always appreciated, so if you can like, comment, and subscribe, comment down if any of the cards maybe you're planning on adding. That'd be good information for me. If you have any information on maybe updates for the channel, also appreciated. And have a nice day.